millennial generation. And joining us now are Erica Williams, a social impact strategist with EWS Strategies. She's a former appointed member of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on Social Media. In San Francisco, Ben Berkowitz, CEO and founder of ClickFix.com. And from Austin, Texas, Norman Horn, a professional engineer and blogger at LibertarianChristians.com. Erica, I want to start with you. We're coming off of the government shutdown, everything that the dysfunction in Washington. Did that change your view, or were you already skeptical of government as an institution?
It didn't change my view. It's actually very expected. Being a millennial, we've come up in a time where many of the institutions that our parents believed in and that actually supported them in their growth and their development have really failed, or at least significantly broken for us. Public education, the government, even many religious institutions. So there's kind of this natural skepticism of how government works, how many institutions in our country and society actually work. That said, research has shown that millennials still believe in their ability to change these institutions, and so it's not a complete abandonment. It's just the sense that there are dramatic changes that are desperately needed.
Norman, I see you shaking your head. First of all, explain why, and also what exactly are libertarian Christians?
Well, first of all, I would agree very much with Erica that government is completely and utterly it's completely and just utterly useless at this point to us. We've seen it break down so much in the past few years, especially with regards to the shutdown even, and yet we're seeing how non-essential it is to our daily lives. And likewise, Libertarian Christians is a project of mine to really begin to talk to the Christian churches throughout the nation and really throughout the world about what a Christian should think about the role of government in our lives, what sorts of theological implications.
So Norman, you're challenging the institutions of both government and church, but I want to challenge you on the assumption that government is utterly useless. I mean, it was government, the military that, for example, killed Osama bin Laden. It's the government that makes sure that the water is safe to drink, the food is safe to eat. Am I wrong?
Well, so many of the government's institutions within it can be operated perfectly legitimately through marketplace forces, for one thing. But also, even those things that do seem essential are often done completely irresponsibly and with wanton disregard, often for human life. And it also, of course, is supported through the looted taxpayer, through the coercion of resources, through taxation, and without people's permission for the most part.
Ben, I want to ask you in San Francisco about your experience with institutions and whether you share this view.
Yeah, I've been working at the local level for the last 6 years, and well, we've seen municipal crises, budget crises for the last 6 years, most dramatically starting in 2007. What we've also seen is citizens getting much more actively involved. Well, I think they're really frustrated with government. It's not being presented with apathy. And on the other side, I have seen a lot of encouraging response from local governments and willingness to change the way we do business and to really think about how we move forward as a country.
And then on the local level, you have a fascinating project. ClickFix.com essentially enables people to take pictures of things, potholes or signs that are broken or stoplights that are out, and actually send that directly to a local municipal government and have it fixed. Explain what that does and how does this fit into it at all?
Yeah, absolutely. We started ClickFix because we were having trouble communicating with our local government back home in New Haven. And being able to create these small transactions between citizens and their neighbors and their governments, and then being able to see a real feedback loop when the issue gets fixed, really breaks down some of these barriers that we're experiencing with connecting with local governments. I'm not sure that we're ready to have that experience yet with the federal government. I don't think we know really where the friction points are between citizens and the federal government. I think certainly we got very close this week to finding out. Most people would be very aware if the federal government went into default. All the people on food stamps, as an example, would suddenly have that experience that I had when we started ClickFix, when we couldn't get potholes fixed in the street or graffiti removed from a building.
For this local effort, and Eric, I wonder if, as far as the institution of philanthropy is concerned, is that also where you see things going in terms of philanthropy being much more on the local and community level than at a larger institutional level?
I'm actually seeing both. Certainly for philanthropy and kind of this new trend of micro-philanthropy with young people joining with their neighbors and their friends online and off to kind of invest in programs and causes that they can see an immediate local impact. That is certainly a trend. That said, we do know that young people actually still believe, and research shows, Harvard Institute of Politics came out with a poll earlier this year that said while 47% of young people and young Americans no longer believe that government and politics are able to quickly and immediately solve their problems, they actually still do believe in their ability and the necessity of their work to actually change that. This is the yes we can, the si se puede generation that really believes there's nothing that we can't fix and solve. And so whether that happens inside, you know, is up for debate. I think a lot of people are doing exactly what Ben is doing, which is finding ways to create and innovate and bring solutions to government. And then also at a later date, I believe more will enter the government.
Norman, as far as your situation in Austin, Texas, though, I wonder if there are limitations to what you can do, what changes can be made when you're focused, say, strictly on your local parish or your local church, when you have an institution like the Vatican and the Pope that is essentially dictating certain policies towards the church.
Well, even the Catholic Church has what's called the principle of subsidiarity, where they actually have the theological principle says that they want problems to be solved at the most local level possible. So when you do have issues of poverty and of despair at a local level, these are things that churches, local congregations can often work together and help solve. My church, for instance, here in town, operates with a number of other congregations of differing denominations, including both Methodists, Presbyterians, etc., to do a local, basically food bank. And it's called the Micah 6 Project. We have done this for years with very little government assistance whatsoever. And these are the types of things that when people and individuals and churches and the small businesses, whoever, are allowed to band together and create solutions on their own, they end up doing much better, much more efficient work than what the government is able to do.
Well, and to that point, I mean, the fact that all the work that you're doing there on the local level, I can see why that reinforces your view that local solutions are much better than say, federal government solutions. But Erica, absolutely, to the point about, aren't there certain limitations? I mean, a local government cannot go and protect national security or cannot necessarily go and provide for the common defense.
Absolutely, and I think what we see with millennials, and I'm a perfect example of that, is that it's not either or. I'm a member of a small local church. I will die for my church. I love it. I've maintained membership my entire life, and we certainly are very effective in administering local aid and ministering to a very local community. That said, I have spent my career engaging with the government and helping young people all across this country figure out how the government and many other institutions can help them live out their purpose and really affect dramatic change, not just on a national level, but also on an international level.
And then do you think it's fair to assume then, therefore, that for most millennials, there is this view of, well, the government is going to exist and there's going to be a certain role for the government to play, but to really make change, it's got to happen on a local level, or for really to make changes, say, in local business, you have to do the sort of thing that you're doing where you're interacting, starting with municipal governments?
Absolutely. I think we're not looking at the eradication of the federal government or anybody that, you know, believes that it should not exist. I think we're looking at a civic reset, essentially. We're saying that we haven't been participating enough as a nation, you know, globally as well, and it's time to get more involved, to help out, to not just show up at the voting booth every 2 or 4 years, but to really participate in new ways. And of course, you know, these kind of community efforts have been happening through organizations and through churches, but you know, through the democratization of the internet, I think we're seeing at a much more personal level as well. And that's when you start to see neighbors coming out and saying, you know, we can fund a new dog park together, or improve this bus stop together.
But Ben, just to be clear,
that really didn't happen before.
Just to be clear, if the federal government comes to you and says, hey, look at all these federal buildings, we want to be able to use see-click fix as far as enabling people to notify us, you're not going to turn down that contract, right?
Oh, absolutely not. And many of those federal buildings are very important. We would obviously love to help with that work.
We're going to have Ben and Norman and Erica stick around, and when we come back, we're going to take a look ahead to the future and talk more about how millennial Americans may change our country in the decades ahead. This is Inside Story.
Things like cyberbullying, that's something that they never had to deal with. But they say we're narcissistic. I don't think that's necessarily true. We're just a completely different generation that has our own different values and different views on things, and I don't think it's fair to say that we're narcissistic or anything like that, or even ignorant. I've heard that one before. I don't think that one's fair either.
Welcome back to Inside Story. That was Alexa Rogers, a college student in Dallas, Texas. She was highlighting what she sees as the disconnect between her generation and older ones. So with us as we continue our discussion, Erica Williams, a social impact strategist with EWS Strategies. She's a former appointed member of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on Social Media. In San Francisco, Ben Berkowitz, CEO and founder of ClickFix.com. And from Austin, Texas, Norman Horn, a professional engineer and blogger at LibertarianChristians.com. Erica, how much of a gap is there between how you see and other millennials see your generation and the perception that the older generations have of you being narcissistic, self-absorbed, not really caring about the world around you?
There is a huge, huge gap. And again, this is not just anecdotal, it is research, fact, and data-based. That this generation is the most civically engaged and civically inclined generation in history. The issue is, or I think the challenge that older generations have, is in understanding what that looks like for this generation, right? It may not be the same level of political engagement and involvement. It may look like increased levels of volunteerism, increased levels and new models of philanthropy, but we are certainly not narcissistic. And again, the research shows that, and all of the stories about social entrepreneurs going out. Ben here is a perfect example of someone seeing a problem and fixing it. And I don't think that he is rare. I don't think that I'm rare, or any of us are rare. I think we are the norm in the sense that we had a mission, a passion, and a vision for a way in which we could make this country better and use the tools that were at our disposal, which were certainly different than our parents, to do so.
Ben, there is the research does show, though, that some of the best and brightest from the millennial generation, though, are still headed towards sort of Wall Street and high-paying jobs and not so concerned about benevolence. In other words, I think some of the projects that you're involved in, for example, may be the exception rather than the rule. What can society do to draw more millennials into the type of projects that you and your team are involved in?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And just to piggyback, actually, and contrast Erica's point a bit, you know, our research shows, our data shows that a large number of our user base is actually boomers. And I'll tell you, someone told me yesterday that they were at a community center in Oakland, and a woman was proudly displaying her first smartphone, and she had explained that her son put the first app on the phone, and it was ClickFix. So I think, you know, millennials are certainly the early adopters, the digital natives to the internet. That's a huge part of what is creating this engagement. With other millennials and with our parents, I think it's just a matter of time before they see that using these digital devices, speaking up, is not a fruitless activity anymore, that real return is coming on this personal investment of time. And I think with time we will see everyone coming to the table and being more engaged.
And Norm, with time for you, how do you see the institutions essentially existing for the millennial generation, say 20 or 30 years from now?
Well, certainly things are going to change. A lot of it is going to be due to the internet. With respect to, for instance, the church, I find that a lot of our elders, the people in the boomer and even the older generation, are very supportive of those of us who are trying to use technology and new means to enact social change in various ways. And whether that looks like trying to engage in the public square a little differently, local government or larger, or whether that looks like trying to do benevolent type projects, they are interested in seeing what we can do. They have a lot of recommendations for us, and we should respect that wisdom in many cases. But they're willing to give us a chance, and they're willing to let us experiment at times and in ways that perhaps they never anticipated. So what I would expect to see happen in the church in the long run is that we try to continue this conversation between these generations and try to come to a better understanding of each other and work towards greater social change over the long term, using the wisdom of all ages in this case, and hopefully with some of our more new technological means that the millennial generation is developing.
Eric, as far as interacting with the federal government, or say even the legislative branch in Congress, do you therefore see, based on the internet technology and the access that people have, much more sort of town halls that are electronic town halls or digital exchanges, or people letting their voices be heard, not by calling members of Congress, but by emailing them or sending them their views?
Absolutely. We're seeing, members' offices really taking advantage of technology in new ways, but it's a slow process. We're talking about a huge institution really trying to adapt technologies in what is a really complicated bureaucracy.
And yet your generation is not very patient when it comes to things that take much time.
I wouldn't say we're not patient. I think what we're seeing, the difference between this generation and previous generations are certainly the ways in which we want to change institutions fall in two categories. One is efficiency. Are we using the best of our resources, the amount of time that we have to get the highest possible result? And I think sometimes in the past, bureaucracy has been an impediment to that, has been an impediment to results. And the second is values that we haven't talked much about here in this conversation, but I do think not greater values, not better values, but perhaps priorities on different values like transparency, like accountability, like tolerance. And I think the combination of technology and efficiency and a value shift will see a dramatic change in many of these institutions we're talking about.
Ben, what would you see in terms of the federal government as an institution? How do you see it working best, say 20, 30 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our federal government really needs to do a better job at providing access both ways. You know, under this administration, there has been a real effort on transparency, on opening data, on making the federal websites and by nature the different organizations within the federal government more accessible. Where I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done is in also allowing the inputs back in. I think that we need to do a better job, the federal government needs to do a better job at listening and understanding where those touch points are with citizens. I'm not sure that's clear right now, but I do think that's going to become more apparent as we move forward.
And Norm, are you optimistic in the least that the federal government can at least take some steps to get to that vision?
Honestly, I'm not, because our history shows of them essentially using crises to ratchet up power for themselves. Even this own shutdown that we've been experiencing and is now coming to an end has really just shown that they're out for creating political theater in order to abscond with power for themselves in various ways.
Erica, any optimism? I was going to say, Erica, any optimism that you have?
I do. I'm optimistic because institutions are both systems and structures and also people. And I think we have to work on changing both at the same time. So as we get young people who are willing to bring new ideas, new technology, and who are willing at some point to step up and run for office and work for federal government, which there are some young people who are doing that, I think the combination of those two forces will see great change.
Erica Williams, the social impact strategist at EWS Strategies, thank you very much. Also in San Francisco, Ben Berkowitz, CEO and founder of SeeClickFix.com, coming to a municipality near you. And Norman Horn, Austin, Texas. You can see some of his writings in the Washington Post. Thank you all very much for joining our program. We appreciate it. And that is it from the team in Washington, D.C., and from me, David Schuster, for now. But you can keep the debate going by logging onto our Facebook page